Excellent. Well, welcome to today. This is going to be Photoshop 101. For the first 30 minutes, I'm going to just step you through what is Photoshop, what are the different parts of it, what are the terms, because one of the things that I want to empower you with by the end of this course is knowing how to search for an answer to your question. So you know what to search for, because there are thousands of tutorials on specific things in Photoshop, but if you don't know what to search for, it's hard to find them, right? And it's a great place, and I do highly recommend part of your homework will be to, on a regular basis, find some of these tutorials and go through them and familiarize yourself with the things that you want to do with Photoshop. Okay, so I'm going to bring my Photoshop up. Tell me if you can see. All right, can you see this? All right, so this is something that we're going to make today, not in the first 30 minutes. We're going to make this in the latter part of today's instruction, but we're going to make it from, you see this URL right here? Go ahead and write that down. I'm going to keep that as a permanent URL. The resources to create this are all in that folder. So the logo, the glimmer effect, the model, the background, those types of things. So that if you wish to, on your own, you can come back and create this. All right. And I'll be using it to do a handful of things as well. All right, so the first thing to know about Photoshop is that this is called your canvas. Your primary area here in which you work is a canvas. And when you start off with a blank slate, right? It'll start off like this, and the most important thing you want to do at the very beginning is size this correctly. And whether you're a photographer or you're doing this for a website or whatever your reasons may be, you'll want to start with a canvas that's the correct size. It's way easier to do that than it is to try to adjust it afterwards. Nevertheless, I'll be able to show you how to adjust something afterwards anyway. The two sizes, go ahead and write these down that you'll want to familiarize yourself with the most. For social media, I recommend a square no less than 1080 by 1080. Now 1080 is the height of a normal monitor screen. Right? And so if somebody looks at your photo at 100% on that screen at 1080, 1080, that's what we, 1080 pixels, then they'll have a nice experience. Now, screens, they get better and better, so if you were to do it at 2000 by 2000 pixels or 3000 by 3000 pixels, all these platforms are equipped to handle large files as well, but you don't want to go below 1080 or else you start getting too small. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's called a raster program. This Photoshop is a raster program. It uses pixels. In fact, let me just show you now what I mean by that. So if I zoom in on her eyes, you'll see here, we've got a bunch of squares. See that? Each one of those squares is a pixel. It allows, basically this tiling of color allows for Photoshop to do amazing things with gradients and depth and all sorts of effects that are difficult to do in other programs like Illustrator, which is a vector program. It uses shapes and then fills those shapes with gradients or fill colors. Raster has its limitations though, and its primary limitation is that if you have a fixed size, making it bigger makes it gummy. It has to create or make up the pixels. If it's taking, for example, this pixel right here, and it's dividing that into 12 pixels and trying to give meaning to that, it has a hard time anticipating what colors would give meaning to a single pixel. So it's always easier to start with a big picture and make it smaller than it is to start with a small picture and make it bigger. All right, the next one, well, I'm going to create a new canvas here. You'll do this on a Mac, it would be Command N. On a PC, it would be Control N, and that N is essentially, I'll do it the slow way here. I hardly ever use the menus up here. I'm sorry, I use keystrokes for everything, but just File New right here. File New will bring you to this option where you can choose from some pre-existing sizes, or you can make it the size you want. And the things that you're going to want to pay attention to are the resolution right here. 72 dpi is the lowest you'll want to consider for a web image. And while some devices, like an iPad and iPhones, they're experimenting with super high resolution, even at the small level, you never need to go larger than 300 dpi. 300 dpi is about the highest that you can achieve in a print environment. And so anything bigger than that is just, it's unnecessary. You're just, you won't need it. All right, so you'll see here that I have here this width, 1920 by 1080. This is the other size that you'll want to keep in mind for a website. 1920 is the maximum width of a standard high definition screen. So what you're looking at here, this screen is 1920 by 1080, and with an image that has been formatted at 1920 by 1080, it will be useful in a full section, a full bar of information, but you can also size it down easily. And one of the great aspects of WordPress is that it naturally creates smaller versions of your photos if you are going to take a large photo and use it in a smaller environment. It doesn't use the big photo unless you force it. It will create a smaller version of it for speed. All right, the next thing is color. So you'll see here that we've got a handful of different colors here. This used to be more important than it is, and I anticipate that within the next 5 years that this is not going to be important anymore. You used to have to define very clearly whether you were using bitmap color, which is 256 colors. It's a very limited color spectrum. Grayscale, which of course is only the black and whites and grays. RGB, which is used in a digital environment. So we start off with a black screen and we project light through that screen to create our color. Now there are 16 million colors that we can produce in an RGB environment, and it is the preferred method to start with. No matter what your end goal is, always start with RGB because it's got the broadest spectrum of color. Now in the print world, they can only print 12,000 of those 16 million colors because they're taking a white surface and they're using really dark inks and trying to use them as sparingly as possible to create your color. That alternate approach is called CMYK, and that's what you see down here. And so I will show you let me just show you right now. We're going to start off with an RGB color, and I'm just going to place bright color on it. So let's go bright green. This is something that of course we can do on a screen, but now watch if I switch my color mode to CMYK, watch what happens to the green. Let's go ahead and flatten, that's fine. Okay, did you see it dim? That's as bright as they can get in the print world. Now when you're holding a print in your hand, it'll still feel bright, it'll still feel neon, but they just can't achieve in a print environment what they can achieve on screen with the 16 million color spectrum. So if you're using your own photography and you're editing your photos, start with RGB with the full spectrum, and if you have to create versions of them that are built for print, then you can you can convert them over to CMYK for brochures or for things of that sort. And as a designer, back from 2000 to maybe 2015, this was something that we had to wrestle with constantly. But with the growth of what we call digital printing, everything is converted over anyway. So we can send them full RGB files. The process will convert that over to what they need, and they'll give you the brightest version of print that they can, but you don't so much have to prepare it on your end as much as understand what's happening when you say, oh, but my picture was so much brighter on my screen. Why is it so dim on this printout? That's what's happening, is that conversion to 12,000 colors instead of the 16 million that you have in RGB. All right, questions this far? Okay. All right, and if I'm going too fast or too slow, Give me an idea, and I'll try to adjust based on your needs. Okay. Okay, so with those two sizes, there are a couple of other sizes that are useful. If you know that you're not going to be using an image full screen on a web page, then my recommendation is come at it with a size that's more appropriate to how you're going to use it. And the two sizes that I will often use are 80 by 720, which is basically your 1920 by 1080. It's used in a lot of environments. All YouTube thumbnails, for example, are ultimately 1280 by 720. It's a very useful size. I also will sometimes just make it by, it's like 6. You know what, let's actually just see here. All right, this is one thing that I'm going to show you. If you have an image and you want to size it down, we have what's called image size in Photoshop, and image size changes the canvas size to be what you want. Changes the whole image with the canvas size all at the same time. So if I take this down to 800, just one moment, you'll see that it gives me my height of 450. There it is. So that 800 by 450, that would be the equivalent. It'll keep the same ratio, but it will make it smaller, 800 by 450. Okay, question? Okay. All right. The other thing is, okay, you get to that by going to image size, or canvas size. So this canvas size is the other one. Now canvas size doesn't change anything with the pixels, it just shaves off parts of your picture. So if, let me show a picture so that you can see what's happening with this. If I come in here with my canvas size and I say, and it works in any system, so right now it's set on inches, but this can be pixels, and you see how it shifts there. If I want this to be, let's say 1280 by 720, that other size, and I did it in, if I use the canvas size, then it's going to chop off meaningful parts of my picture. It's just going to shave those off. Whereas if I do the image size and come down to 1280, then it's actually just going to make a smaller version of the same. See how that works? And the rule of thumb is this: your 300 DPI, right, times the inches. So if it's a 4 by 6 postcard, that's 4 times 300, so that's, you want it to be 1200, and then 6 by 300, which is 1800 pixels. So you would want that to be a minimum of 1200 by 1800 pixels. But this will do the math for you, as long as when you create your canvas to begin with, when we come in here to begin with, let's say we start with inches and we want it to be 300 DPI because we want it to be maybe 8.5 by 11, right, sheet size. It will convert that for you so that you can see, if I put this back to pixels, that is 2550 pixels by 100 pixels. Dots per inch, and it's the print equivalent of PPI, which is pixels per inch. And they are essentially, they're synonymous with one another, but dots per inch. So in a print environment, that they print with dots on paper, right?
That's the same. I thought you said TPI.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yep, DPI for dots per inch and PPI for pixels per inch, but it's the same measurement. It's the measurement of detail that you have in your photo. Okay. All right. Whether you have a white background or a black background or a transparent background, that's all just your preferences. Ultimately, you're going to be working with many levels, and we're gonna introduce levels today, but we're going to go into great detail on the power of Photoshop in our next Photoshop session. Unless actually we get through it and you guys are all like, give me more, then we might have time to do some of that today. All right. Okay, so this is creating your initial template. What I will often do, and maybe I'll have a sample here. Let me just see if I've got a quick sample here. I'll pull one from one of my clients. Recently, they wanted us to take all of the team photos for ES3, and they wanted us to put them on the same background. so that they have a consistency in those team photos. Let's just go here and find some of those. And here's my PSB file. So PSB and PSD are your working formats in Photoshop. Photoshop Document and Photoshop Big. That's what PSB stands for. So if your file is over 2 gigabytes in size, then it requires you to save it as a PSB. But you don't have to worry about that. They're the same. It's just a large file format. So that if you have, I have probably 1,000 layers in this one. So right now I've consolidated them to, I don't know, 30 images. But if you see this little icon that's down in the corner here, each one of these images is produced with multiple layers. And this is one of the, I'm going to go into the power of the layer palette by itself. It's incredible. The full extent of which will be in our next group. But I'm just going to unlock this so you can kind of see what we're talking about. So each one of these has a picture of the person, some coloring for his tie, because the original photo didn't, the original photo looked like this, just came on a white background. We masked the white background away. We put him on the blue background that they want for everybody. And then here we have a, what's called curves. It just adjusts the darkness and lightness of a section. And you'll see here that I've only masked the tie, and then I placed a color overlay over the top of that. And ultimately, I can take all of these elements and apply them to each of my people, which speeds up the process. But when all is said and done, now this is going to answer one of your questions, output. Okay? When I have my photos, now these are large. If we look at the image size, these are 2443 by 3289. It's larger than I'm ever going to need in an internet environment. But they wanted to use these for both print and internet. So I output 2 versions, a print version of each of their photos and an internet version. The internet version was 446 by 600. They just wanted a little team shot of each, right? So what I would do is I would take the ones that I want to output. Let's just say I want to output just these 4 here. And up here in the layers palette, instead of going to file save, one at a time, which is how we used to have to do it. In fact, when I started, Photoshop didn't even have layers. So it was just Microsoft Paint, but a little glorified. We would export as, and this is a very powerful feature that allows you to quickly, literally in about 30 seconds, output all of these pictures in the same format and same size, at whatever sizes you want them to be. So for example, I can come in here, I select all of my pictures, like this, and then I can say, I want my height to be 600 for all of them, and I want it to be a JPEG format. Okay? Now all of them are showing over here that they're going to be 446 by 600. You see that? That means when I output it, it's giving me image size and canvas size versions from this, but only on what I'm exporting. My working file is still the full size, full version of this. Nothing is lost in terms of its quality. So I always keep my PSD and my PSB files full size, full RGB for the full color, and when I export, I can limit it then to whatever I want it to be limited to. You can see here that this is 18.24% of the original size, and if I need to, I can also change the canvas size on top of that, so that, let's say I wanted these to be quite a bit thinner, I wanted them to be 400, and you'll watch them grow thinner here in just a sec. So there's a thinner version of it. So based on what your needs are on your website, first decide what size you want those pictures to be, and then export it accordingly with this export feature. That's by far the best way. Those will save them in a folder, and right here where it says quality 6, you're not going to see a difference in quality until you get down to maybe 4. So this one offers 7, 6, 5, and 4. And you may not even see the difference at 4. Some photos just, Photoshop is getting better and better at compressing this photo. So it's that number has to do with how compressed the photo is going to be. And when it comes to web development, you want your photos as small as possible. You want them to be 100 kilobytes, right? Whereas right now, because of this compression, these photos are going to be 58 kilobytes, which is incredible. And when you're in the web development world, you start paying attention to how big a photo is. And if a photo is 3 megabytes, oh man, no, it's gonna take time to load, especially on a phone. Phones load slower than desktops do. So, all right. So yeah, right here, Doug. In the layers, I have converted them to a smart object. Okay, so right here if you right-click on any of these menus, and of course I've got keystrokes for it all, but we've got a full menu of options here, and of those, there's convert to smart object right here. I can also take my smart object and convert it back to layers, right, which is what you saw before. And now it's converted back to layers. And you'll see that this one is a smart object within a smart object. And I have sometimes in my designs, I have 12 layers. It's kind of like Inception, right? 12 layers deep of dreams. I have 12 layers deep of smart objects nested within smart objects, nested within smart objects. And we won't go into the full power of that in today's lesson, but in the next one we will, because of what we'll be building from it. You can also double click on a smart object. Let me just do that. And it will open up a PSB folder separate from the original one. So this is my original folder or file. This is my smart object opened up as a layered file. I can make changes here, so I can come in here and say, oh, I don't want that color. I want it to be this bright green color. Let's do that, and let's apply that to the bottom one as well. So we're going to go bright green, and when I hit save, it's actually saving this in temporary folders in a Photoshop folder. It's very hard to find. It's easy to find within Photoshop, but finding this is going to be tricky. It's not actually saving it in an accessible place for you. But you'll see here that in my working file now, that smart object has updated and is now the green that was over in that nested file. So if you don't like that, you can just back up, and we're back to our blue, and it will erase that temporary file. Now this PSB folder is keeping track of all of these, and it's keeping track of it within Photoshop. So where it saves it is less important, because it will be retained and remembered in the PSB folder. Just don't ever lose your PSB folder here. Okay. All right, so that's a little bit about layers.